Hi, seventh grade. This video is going to focus on plot diagramming a narrative. I'm going to go over several examples of the plot diagrams that you guys turned in. I picked a couple of them. And then we're going to go over a children's story, and we're going to try to figure out who the main characters are, or the characters are, what is the setting, what is the conflict, what goes in the exposition, what is the climax of the story, the falling action, and resolution. But first, let's go over a couple examples of student work that I collected. So if you remember, the sources were about the Middle Ages in the 800s. And there's a lot of invasions, there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of war. So that is your setting, right? So this setting. From this setting, you're going to create a conflict. The biggest issue that I saw was a student said, well, they're being invaded. Well, yeah, that's more like the setting, right? That's part of the whole life, the whole setting. Within this setting, you need to create a conflict. Within this space, within these sources that I gave you, you need to create a conflict. A conflict that was logical based on the setting, based on the sources, based on the situation that you're given. So let's look at this student. So this student said the main characters are Paul and Sam. Okay, nothing too extraordinary. That's good. The setting is a small rural town in France. That's really awesome, right? Because your sources are about small regional areas in Europe. I like how the student said rural and also France, because that's Europe, because the sources were about Europe. And then in UCLA and UCSC, I did allow them to use one of the readings. So they also said a castle. So this most likely will be like a manor. And we'll talk about manor coming up soon. Okay, so exposition. So the exposition is the part of the story where we learn about the characters, where we learn about the setting, where we have some dialogue, people are talking to each other. Like you're setting up the stage for what's coming up next. And the setting is all based on the sources, right? If the sources talked about how there's trouble, how there's invasions, how there's issues, so you should also be incorporating that into your setting, into your exposition. So this person said, Paul lives in a small town in France. Invasion and disease have taken over the town. Okay, good, because they used part of the sources. Good job. The roads are filled with bodies. Okay, better. There's a lot of chaos. Invaders burned down many buildings. Okay. Be careful with buildings because these aren't like skyscrapers. This is small shacks, right? Okay, so the conflict. Paul wants to help fight the attackers. Be careful with your spelling. Attackers is with a C here. But little to no people are willing to help him. They think it's useless. Okay, so that's the conflict. That's the big conflict. They have completely given, careful with your spelling, given up. They are relying, spelling again, right? When you are writing a narrative and you have multiple spelling issues, that's eventually going to take you from a 2 to a 1. So your narrative is graded as a 4, 4, 2. A 4 is how well you use the sources out of 4, how well you use the sources, and how well you incorporate into your story. This second 4 is how you use narrative techniques like dialogue and narration. And the 2 is grammar, punctuation, and capitalization. If you have all these issues of spelling, this is going to become a 1. So you could get a 441, which is a good grade, but be careful with those ones. Okay, so government, they are relying on the government, but the government is falling apart. Now, the big problem here, it sounds like Paul wants to help, right? This is the conflict here, okay? Sometimes you'll notice that there's like little conflicts within the bigger conflict. There's like, the setting itself is a conflict here, but you have to have a different conflict. I hope that makes sense. So the setting itself, the space that you are in, it's a conflict because you're unsafe, right? But what's the other conflict? What's the other issue you're gonna focus on? Okay, so now I'm gonna read the rising action, and the rising action comes after the conflict. So Paul does not want to give up hope, but many people don't believe in him. Sam decides to help him. He has already lost his family and wants to take revenge. They finally convince some people to help them to begin training day and night. Okay, so they train. I wonder how they train. The invaders come, they burn down most of the buildings. The people begin to realize incomplete here. So that's the climax is gonna be the battle, I guess, right? Then we have the town people decide to come up with a plan to defeat the invaders. They devise a plan. If they all they do is put in action. It sounds like this is. I'm a little confused. So they come and they fight. I guess they fight here, but then the townspeople decide that they're gonna also fight. Okay, they use their plan to defeat the invaders. From that day on, they lived in peace. Now, this wouldn't work. This conclusion wouldn't work or resolution because remember, these time periods don't end in peace for a while. Actually, it could work. It's fine. I'll take it back. But it's not the most logical conclusion. So your conclusion must be logical, okay? Let's look at another one. So here we have main characters are Jane and Clark, a small town in Europe, 750, okay. Exposition, Jane walks around town and searches for food along with her brother Clark. Conflict, Jane must run away with her brother because of attack. They struggle to find refuge and survive. Okay, so this is the conflict here. The conflict is this. It's a little generic or a little general. I want the conflict to be a little more specific to the situation because, again, there's a big conflict here. The big conflict is that they're being invaded, right? We get that. They're being invaded. It's chaos. You can't say the conflict is they're being invaded. That's not enough. That's part of the setting. Again, I'll say that. The conflict cannot just be they're being invaded because that's part of the setting. That's part of the situation that they live in. What's the further conflict? So the further conflict here is Jane must run away. That's like the other conflict. Jane hears shouting. She sees people beginning to flee. So this is incomplete. You are going to be getting a grade from me just for your plot diagram. Jane, so the turning point, Jane grabs Clark and runs away, escaping the attack. Okay. Jane and Clark are lost, eventually finally refuge in the forest. They continue into the forest and eventually find a castle, their safest area of protection. Okay. I mean, I can see how this story could become like pretty good, but there's a lot missing in this document. Okay, so let's go with this one. We have Kimberly and Alexander, town in Europe. Okay, the date is correct. Alexander and Kimberly live in town in Europe in the 800s. Okay. Alexander has to fight and survive war to make justice for Kimberly. So what happened to Kimberly? What is the conflict? Let's see, Alexander gets selected to fight in the military since there wasn't many soldiers. Kimberly has to stay home alone and clean house because they have no parents. Barbarians kill people from the town, including Kimberly. Oh, I see. Okay, and Alexander wants justice for his little sister. So awesome. I like this one. This is good. And this makes sense too now. The war happens, many people die, so they obviously, the turning point is when they go to war. After the war, he is one of the little that survive. Okay, the barbarian ends up killing him by a surprise act of a shot in the back. I don't think they had guns yet at this time, so be careful. It needs to be logical. You can say like a spear, whatever. Theme: not all stories have a happy ending. I like this. This is a good setup. I like it. Okay, Frank and his mom Olivia, a small town. You have to be more specific of where it is. Is it in, it needs to be in Europe. Exposition: Frank and his mom live in a small town by themselves and their dad died. They are struggling to survive and Frank needs to do his best to help out his mom. Attack is happening in town. Frank goes to see where him and his mom could stay while his mom is hiding in a secret spot. This is not a conflict, right? This is a setting situation. right? You need a better conflict. Again, you need to understand like the setting sometimes is a conflict in itself. Like the sources that I gave you, when you write a story, you're gonna say, well, yeah, the setting is a conflict, it's a problem, right? It's a huge problem to have because they're being invaded. But what other conflict can you make up? Again, the conflict that you develop is going to be made up, but it still needs to be true to the sources. You cannot say they lost their iPhone because they have no iPhones, they have no electricity. That wouldn't make any sense, and it's not logical. Um, so this person will need to work on their conflict. This is mine, and I showed it to Davis. This says, so the conflict, so I have a title. I think I had a title somewhere. I guess I didn't have a title on this one. Okay, so the exposition, I'm gonna have the protagonist, Michael. Then there's a gang of thieves and kidnappers. There's a town in France. Internal conflict, should Michael risk his life? External conflict, so this is the conflict that I kind of gave you with the sources, right? Like there's destruction, there's people being taken, there's ravaging, there's burning up, churches are being destroyed. But there's also a conflict that I made up based on the sources. And my conflict was Michael is 16. Not about conflict, this is my exposition. Michael 16 lives with his family, works hard at their store, keeps store safe. The town is invaded by a gang of invaders. So this will be my conflict. This will be one of my conflicts. Family is taken. Michael runs for the forest. Michael eats food in the forest, decides to find family, searches the town. So again, this will be my main conflict here. Should Michael risk his life? Okay, nowhere in the sources does it talk about Michael. That's just a problem that I came up with. I came up with the names. I came up with the main conflict that is based on the sources. The climax is there's a big fight, Michael versus the gang. Others join into the fight the gang. Gang leader is killed. Michael finds some of his family, others died. Another gang shows up and destroys the town. Michael founds his family, but were soon killed by another gang. So this is not a happy ending, kind of like what another student said. Here we have Hazel, Lavina, and Peter. This is not acceptable because this is part of the setting. This is part of what I gave you. You have to create your own conflict. Again, this is not acceptable because you have to create your own conflict based on the sources provided. This is all sources. What major issue or what major problem can you come up with that you can come up with that's logical? So this wouldn't work. Hazel is Centurion. Lavina Hazel is Centurion. I don't know what that means. And Peter's on guard duty for a city. So the issue that I have with this is just a conflict. This is the biggest problem. Okay, here we have Jan and Bob. The conflict is there are robbers found on medieval castles. There are robbers from the medieval castle stealing crops from Jan and Bob. This is a good conflict, right? Nowhere did it say that in the sources that there was a guy or robbers stealing from Jan and Bob, right? It doesn't say that, but you can infer that that could have been a conflict. So I really appreciate it. John and Bob are two boys who live in a small village in France. John and Bob has just woken up and getting ready to farm the crops. Jan and Bob wake up and go to the farm crops. Peter then farm crops for a while. So this person here is kind of giving me, this is the exposition. This is exposition. What I needed this to be was, this needed to be what happens after the conflict. So we have the exposition, and I know that there wasn't enough room. It's just an outline. This is the beginning of the story. Then you're gonna have the conflict. And then you're gonna have what comes after the conflict, which is the exposition. Here you're gonna have the most exciting part. After he punched the person, Jan realized that he punched his father. Ooh, so his father is a thief? Oh, I like this story. Interesting story. I like it. Good. I like this one. This is good. This one, Justinian, Paulina, and Frank. Justinian was struggling on how to stop violence because there were a lot of highway robbers that travel became difficult. So again, this is too much to do with the setting. Um, it could work, but try to make it more specific. Try to create your own fictional problem that is supported by the story. It's kind of like this one, right? They created a story. The father's the one that's the thief, right? I just want you to understand, like, the sources are there to provide like a setting or a setup, or like the background of what your story is gonna be like. Um, so Justina was in charge of the kingdom. Paulina was his wife, and Frank is a soldier. It was another difficult day. Let's see what they were. Barbarians have broken in the first half of the castle. Some people have left to go cower in the depths of a nearby forest. Paulina was getting sick from a disease and was contaminated, so the disease doesn't spread. From Frank desperately needs to help protection the walls. So is the conflict the disease? So be careful, be more specific with this. And that's all I have. So I'm gonna read you a little story that I've read to my son a couple times. And I want you to figure out who the characters are. So the characters. I want you to find out what the conflict is. So you might need to have a piece of paper. Actually, I'll give you one of these so you can write it down. So I need the main characters. What is the setting? The exposition. So this is just identifying the different parts of the story. What is the conflict? What is the rising action? What is the climax? And I'll help you with this. Falling action and the resolution. Okay? Let's start. Again, I'll be helping you with part of these, but I won't give you all of them. So this story is called The Best Show and Share by Mercer Mayer. So here we have dialogue. For those of you guys that don't remember what dialogue is people talking. Okay. Next week is show and share. So figure out what to bring, my teacher said. So here we have a comma. You see I'm gonna just highlight it. Here we have the comma inside the quote. Okay, my teacher said, and then we have a period. The bell rang. It was time to go home. She gave us a sheet of paper for our parents to sign. For those of you guys that forgot, this is called narration. Narration. This is a first-person perspective because it says the bell rang. It was time to go home. She gave us. So it's talking about them, about themselves. Again, so here you have two examples, two different examples. You have an example of dialogue. Dialogue is the quotes, people talking, and narration. The narration is just as important as dialogue. Be careful because you can't just have dialogue. He said, I said, you said. You can't just have that. You need a narrator to drive the story. Okay. Next one. At home, I asked my mom. So again, start thinking. What is the setting of this? What is going to be the conflict? So the setting from here, we know that it looks like the setting is a school. They're at school. One of the main characters is going to be, it looks like, well, you don't know it yet, but you'll see that it's this little guy. And it looks like the teacher's also involved quite a bit. Okay? At home, I asked my mom. So here's another character. He said, what can I bring? So again, remember, this is first person because it says I. At home, I asked my mom, what can I bring? Bring your dog, she said. So the teacher, for those of you guys that are following along, the story is apparently about show and share. So they're supposed to bring something from their home to share with the rest of the class. So it sounds like that could be like a small conflict, right? Let's see. At home, I asked mom, what can I bring? Bring your dog, she said. So here you see This person is talking and they have their own line. There's a different person that's talking, so they have their own line here. This is his mom. This is another character. Another character. So we have three characters so far. We have the narrator, who's this little guy. We have the teacher, and then we have the mom. Little sister wanted me to bring her. I can't bring you. You're my sister, I said. So, she said. I don't like how they use the word said so much. So, she said. Never mind, I said, and went outside. So avoid this situation here with I said. The reason they do it for this book is because it's a book for first or second graders, and it has very simple language. But you are seventh graders. Maybe I could bring an ant farm. No, ants are yucky. So it sounds like there's like a small conflict here already, that he doesn't know what to bring to show and tell. Like that sounds like a little, like a small conflict. And you'll see that a lot of stories have smaller conflicts. And went outside. Maybe I could bring an ant farm. No, ants are too yucky. Maybe I could collect different leaves. No, too much work. So this is all still part of the exposition. We're learning about the characters. We're learning about who they are. We're learning about where they live. What time is it? Sounds like this is the daytime, still daytime. So he doesn't want to bring leaves. He doesn't want to bring ant farms because of different situations. I called my friends. Timothy. Timothy was bringing his tarantula. So again, you see all the narration that's happening here? Right? There's a lot of narration. Narration is how you drive the story forward. I'll call my friends. Timothy was bringing his tarantula. Tiger was bringing his long-haired hamster named Thundercloud. Henrietta was bringing her dog, Fluffy. Gator was bringing his stamp collection. Malcolm was bringing his snake. Bun Bun was bringing her dog collection. So there's an issue here, right? He doesn't know what to bring to show and tell. That's you can say that's a conflict. That's an issue. I didn't know what to bring. You'll see that there's gonna be this. This is still kind of part of the narration of the this is part of the exposition that is going to lead to a bigger conflict. I went to the stream to find some worms for fishing. I was looking around when a big bullfrog hopped out of the stream, right into my coffee can for worms. Wow, that's great, I thought. Okay. Here I could use quotes. I mean, I could. Or you can just leave it the way they did it. So he found a frog, this big boy right here. I put the lid on the can and took the bullfrog home. Dad found an old aquarium. It's another character. We fixed it up for my frog. The sister doesn't look too happy. Kind of reminds me of you guys when I give you a lot of homework. It's okay. It's okay, I do it for you. We put him in, but before we got the lid on, he jumped right across the room into the coffee can on the floor. Wow, said Dad. He likes that can. We tried again and did the same thing over and over, and he did the same thing over and over again. How do they know it's a he? I don't know. You've got a special show and share, said Mom. So again, here we have some more dialogue. I named him Leaping Lizard. So the conflict so far has been that he didn't know what to do, didn't know what to bring. I told my friends about Leaping Lizard, but they didn't believe me. After school, I showed them, and they were amazed. I made a poster. This is all going to lead to... You have to kind of understand, like, sometimes the conflicts are not going to be exactly at the end of the exposition. You see that this conflict is a little later. There is a small conflict here so far, so that's good, right? There's a small conflict that he's trying to figure out. So right now, you can think of this is the exposition. There's going to be another conflict coming up. You'll see it. I made a poster all about bullfrogs. I got pictures. So when you guys do your narrative, you're going to have the exposition. And then you're going to have a conflict. You're going to have the climax. And then you're going to have the falling action. Okay? So when you guys write your own, Don't have multiple conflicts. Just come up with a good conflict and have it here. And then talk about it. Talk about the issues that come after the conflict. I made a poster all about bullfrogs. I got pictures off the internet. The night before show and share, I pasted everything down. Leaping Lizard sat in his coffee can watching me. He really liked that can. I went to bed so excited about the next day. Morning came and I jumped out of bed, got dressed, and ate breakfast. All the parents were driving their kids to school. Here's the big conflict. I went to get my frog. He was gone. Oh no, I forgot to put the top of the aquarium on top of his aquarium. I ran to the coffee. So this is the big conflict. The small conflict was first that he couldn't find what he needed to bring to school. That's kind of all part of this position. The problem with this story is that the conflict happens later in the story. And for your story, I want it to happen earlier. So this is the big conflict that he has. I ran to the coffee can, no frog. Mom, I screamed, Leaping Lizard is missing. We looked everywhere. I was already late for school. So here we're going to be focusing on the climax. I was already late for school. Mom said, take your poster to share. I'll give you a note for the teacher. I'm sure I will find your frog. So here we're gonna get to the climax. We went to the school. I was so upset. Everyone took turns showing and sharing. When it was my turn, I thought I would be sick. This is where we start getting to the climax, right? The very top. Suddenly, this is like the most exciting part. Oh my God, the mom saves the day. Suddenly, mom came into the room with the aquarium, the coffee can, and my frog. I found him, she said. I took my turn. Everyone was, so this is the falling action now. Now we're gonna have the falling action. So at the very top, you have the mom who brings the ugly frog in, and everything's so exciting, right? I took my turn. Everyone was amazed. Leaping Lizard jumped into the can every time. When it was all over, I got the most interesting ribbon. Falling action. Malcolm was mad because he thought his snake should win. This is kind of like the face you guys make when I give you those ed puzzles that are 20 minutes or longer. It's because I care. Malcolm was mad because he thought his snake would win. Again, you're coming to the resolution now, right? Timothy got most scary. Henrietta's dog got most fluffy. Actually, everybody got a ribbon. It was the best show and share ever. So this is the resolution. Again, this story is very simple because it's made for 7-year-olds, but you get the point, right? The conflict needs to be logical. It's based on little kids. It's based on a school, right? It needs to be logical, and it needs to follow a certain format. You have characters, you have dialogue, you have narration, which is like when people say that, like, this is him talking. The story is going to be first person or third person. Stay consistent. You cannot go back and forth between third person and first person. You have to either do it third person or do it first person. You cannot go back and forth. Another thing that I noticed in some of these papers that I collected was that you have to stay consistent with the tenses. The story either takes place in the present tense or the past tense. You cannot go back and forth unless you're using like flashbacks or something like that, right? You cannot go back and forth between tenses. You must stay consistent when it comes to these things. Next week, I will be giving you 2 more sources, or I'll do 3 sources, and you're gonna create another one of these. Eventually, I will give you, and I'm gonna give you feedback. I'll probably create another video like this one. I'll give you feedback. I'll check with a number of you, and eventually I will give you an assessment on how you do this. You're not gonna be writing a story for my class. You'll be doing one for Miss Black, and I'll be supporting because we feel that if we give you 2 different stories to write, it's gonna be too overwhelming, and instead I wanna focus on certain skills that she's focusing on, like narration or coming up with a conflict, stuff like that, or even punctuation and grammar. Again, please take this seriously. You're amazing, and yeah, keep going, guys.